for Saanich Gulf Islands regarding the environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what a surprising honor it is for me at this moment to realize that I'm one of the last speakers that you'll hear from that chair. I wish you, of course, I'm not supposed to address the Speaker, and I'm sure it'll be removed from Hansard, but best wishes for your future and your big move. I raised this question, Mr. Speaker, some time ago, and it was in relation to the question of climate targets. The question was asked in May before the Honourable Minister of Environment had tabled the targets that had been, at that point, overdue. Due to in the UN negotiating process in the Conference of the Parties within the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, it was determined at the 2013 negotiations, where I was present in Warsaw, that in order to ensure all countries were really prepared to seriously commit to a binding, comprehensive climate treaty in this December's meetings in 2014, actually it was decided in 2012 rather, I correct myself, in Warsaw, that all countries would submit their targets within the first quarter of 2015. That was repeated again in Lima in 2014, and we had, at the time I asked the question, not seen Canada's targets. Subsequently, the targets were tabled. They happened to be the weakest in the G7. The target that was announced by our Honourable Minister of Environment on the Friday afternoon of a long May weekend was that Canada would commit to 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. It's substantially weaker than any other countries. We had in Copenhagen, of course, tied our target to that of the U.S., but since the U.S. has met its target that it selected in 2009 in Copenhagen, Canada has fallen off that level of ambition and is even weaker now. Now, the response I received from the Honourable Minister included a claim that's repeated so often that I thought I'd like to try to lay it to rest in this late show this evening. And it's this. She said, quote, "Our Conservative government is the first government in Canadian history that has reduced greenhouse gas emissions," close quote. Now, Mr. Speaker, it is true that during the time that this Prime Minister has been in office, greenhouse gas levels did drop. They dropped for one reason only. They dropped between 2008 and 2009 due to the global financial collapse. I don't believe the current Prime Minister wishes to take credit for personally engineering a global financial collapse, nor do I think anyone would believe him if he tried to claim credit for it. But that is the one and only reason our greenhouse gas levels dropped. They dropped from a level of around 724, 25 megatons to about 692, 93, if memory serves. That's when they dropped. And ever since our economy began to recover, because of the complete and abject failure of this Prime Minister to put in place any plan to achieve emission reductions, emissions, and you can check the line on Environment Canada websites, ever since the economy began to recover after 2009, emissions have continued to rise. They are now slated by 2020, continuing to rise year on year, to be slightly below what they were in 2005. Now, they'd be above that if it wasn't for provincial action. The decision of the province of Ontario to close its coal-fired power plants was important. Unfortunately, the growth in the oil sands overwhelmed the cuts that were made by various provincial governments. So it comes to this in the 30 seconds I have left, Mr. Speaker. We are now mere months from the negotiations that must achieve a global binding treaty to reduce greenhouse gases. We have been told by the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the International Energy Agency, and now the Vatican, that the world must act and act with more ambition. Canada is now viewed globally as a laggard, and the only way that we will have the kind of treaty the world needs is if Canada once again becomes a leader, which means in the next few months we must have a new Prime Minister. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I too wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your incredible service here in this House. We both were elected back in 2004, and it's a real honor to have served in these parliaments with you. And because it is probably my last chance to speak in this 41st Parliament, I did want to take this opportunity to also thank my colleague from Saanich Gulf Islands. I'm going to miss our plethora of late shows. We get to spend a lot of time with each other. I always joke I spend more time with her than my wife. but I've gotten to know her, and we've worked together on her private members bill, the National Lyme Disease Strategy Act, and I want to thank her very much for working together on that and accomplishing something very useful in this Parliament together. I also want to say that we share a mutual friend in the Honourable Pauline Browse, and it's nice to be able to work with her as well. You know, I do very much respect her commitment, not only to the environment, but also her constituents. So the response to your question, Mr. Speaker, on May 15th, our government announced its intended nationally determined contribution, the INDC, under the new International Climate Change Agreement ahead of the G7 meeting in June. Canada has a fair and ambitious target that is in line with other major industrialized countries. It reflects our national circumstances, including Canada's position as a world leader in clean electricity generation. We will continue to take a responsible and balanced approach. Canada stated that it intends to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. In addition to announcing Canada's 2030 target, the Minister of the Environment announced our government's intent to develop new regulatory measures to reduce emissions. These measures build on actions taken to date under our government's responsible sector-by-sector approach. These new regulatory measures will reduce methane emissions from the oil and gas sector, regulate the production of chemicals and nitrogen fertilizers, and regulate emissions from natural gas-fired electricity generation. Mr. Speaker, our government's record is clear. We have reduced emissions while growing the economy and creating good, well-paying jobs for Canadians. Canada will continue to take cooperative action with its continental trading partners, particularly with the United States, in areas where our economies are closely integrated, and we will work towards further action in integrated sectors of the economy, including energy and transportation. Mr. Speaker, we will work cooperatively with the provinces and territories on these goals while respecting their jurisdictions. And once again, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and all the best to your lovely wife and kids in your future.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my honourable friend, the Parliamentary Secretary. I look forward to going to COP21 in Paris with a Canadian delegation that will include members of all parties in this place, and perhaps I'll be fortunate enough that my friend, the Parliamentary Secretary, will be on that delegation. I have now realized, as he has reminded us, that I'm down to about 30 seconds in the 41st Parliament to speak in this chamber, where I am honoured to serve the extraordinary constituents of Saanich Gulf Islands. I am deeply grateful to them, and I also want to express how grateful I am to my colleagues in this House on all sides of the chamber, dear friends who also work hard for their constituents. And I want to say particularly to my friend, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, how much I appreciated his help when he was Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health on the Lyme disease bill. It's now law. It wouldn't have happened without my honourable colleague across the way. And I will close here only to say, God bless you all. Best of luck and best of wishes over the coming months. Well, I hope I'll be fortunate enough to be back in this chamber in the near future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague for her very generous comments. Mr. Speaker, our budget outlines the actions we're taking to address climate change and protect our environment. We have invested significantly to support initiatives that reduce emissions and improve air quality for Canadians, and we will be investing $1 billion into transit annually. Our government has reduced emissions, lowered taxes for middle-class families, and balanced our budget. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for this honor of addressing you in this House. I tell you, I come to work every day and I have to pinch myself to realize that I am part of this wonderful chamber that very few Canadians have the opportunity to share. Thank you very much to my colleagues.